Saul Wayte Lad 1-2. Welcome back. Thank you guys for joining me today. We're going to do chapter 17, but I want to start with a fact of the day to learn about some Roman culture a little bit. Remember, this fact might be on the next quiz. I thought we'd learn about something Romans would do to pass the time during the day on a really hot day like it's been the last few days. They didn't have air conditioning like we do in Florida. So what did they do when it was hot? They were getting muggy, they were getting sweaty. They would head to the thermae. Now, thermae is the Roman word, the Latin word for a bathhouse. Okay, we don't think about these as much nowadays because we all have baths in our homes. You have showers and baths and everything, but running water was very, very uncommon in ancient Rome. So most people were not taking daily showers. So if you wanted to get out and get in a bath, but also do some other stuff, you can go to the thermae. These are usually big, extensive complexes. These were not you just go in and take a bath and then leave. These were big things. So you can see from this diagram here that they could have an exercise area like a gym. There could be a swimming pool, and then there was different temperatures of water you could get into. There was, the cold room, the hot room, the warm room, and so it was more like a spa. If you think like a big spa nowadays was the thermae. There'd be dressing rooms, of course, just like locker rooms, and some big ones. There was even entertainment. There'd be things like theaters. There'd be like libraries to read. There'd be like recital halls to listen to poetry or music. So this could be really something that you spend your time at. The average Roman would be able to go to these because they kept the prices low. The government would sometimes subsidize the prices so that it's really cheap to get into these because you want to give the people something to look forward to, something to do during the day so that they're, if the less content they are with their lives, the more likely they are to get, feeling like they need to riot or, get upset at the government. But if the government or an emperor provides a cheap bath for them, that's going to be something they thank you for. So these were usually pretty reasonable costs. Let me show you some of the different parts of the thermae. I'm going to give you on the next slide some common rooms of the thermae. This is not an exhaustive list, just some of the more common rooms, and I might ask you about one of these on the quiz. The apoditarium might be one of the first places you go into, and that was like a locker room or a dressing room. So there'd be maybe an attendant or a slave or someone checking you in, and you would check your clothing in, and they would keep it on a little hole in the wall, almost like a locker. And then you get it when you leave because you're not going to be wearing a big toga and stuff to go around the bathhouses. These houses were pretty massive, like I mentioned. It depends on which one it was, but a lot of them were massive. This one right here, you can see in the picture, is called the Baths of Caracalla. Caracalla is one of the emperors, and we don't look back at him as the greatest emperor, but people probably would have been very appreciative that he built this massive bathhouse for them to use within the city of Rome. So he probably would have been popular for that. So the apoditarium is the locker room. The hypocaust was the ingenious heating system of the bathhouses. You had to have ways to heat this, right? They didn't have, electrical power and pumps and things like we do nowadays. So the hypocaust was a system where they would heat the water in one room, and then it would take it would take the heat and disperse it through different rooms of the bath. And it was really, for its time, it was very, very complex and technologically advanced. And usually the hotter rooms would be the ones closer to the hypocaust, the heating system, but the heat and steam and stuff would move underneath the floors and it'd be kind of like going through little vents. So it was very, very interesting. The caldarium would be the hot room of the bath. That's where if you want to get it really hot, almost like nowadays, if you want to go to a hot tub or something, this would be the caldarium. Very hot water. It'd probably be very close to the hypocaust. The tepidarium, you can probably see the word tepid in there. Tepidarium meant kind of warmish water, but not very hot, not very cold. It's kind of in the middle, tepidarium. The frigidarium was the cold room. And this is a room you go to, just maybe it's a hot day. Maybe you want to get a little refreshed. You might go in the cold room. You might go to multiple rooms. Sometimes nowadays it feels good to get in the hot tub and then take a cool shower or a cool pool after that. They might do the same thing. So the frigidarium is the cold room, and you see the word frigid coming from that. The palaestra is where you might go to exercise before you get in the pool. This would be a gym area. So there might be areas for certain types of exercise. Wouldn't be quite the same as our gym. They didn't have, machines and weight benches and stuff and treadmills, but they would have things like maybe like medicine balls, things you could lift like that, maybe an area you could walk around or run around, maybe even a wrestling area, depending on what the place was. But the palaestra was the place to get exercise. The Unctorium was an interesting place. It's hard to imagine, but again, they didn't have the nice soaps and stuff that we do nowadays. So Unctorium is if you're really dirty, needed to get really clean, you go to Unctorium, and the Unctorium would be where a slave or an attendant or maybe a friend, if you're with someone, it depends, would put oil, kind of give you an oil massage. It could be olive oil or some other type of oil, and then the oil would be scraped off of your body, and that oil is supposed to take off like the layer of grime that the ancient world is a dirty place, especially living in a big city. You have animals around, you have dirt and dust everywhere. So probably just living in a big city, even like nowadays, you get a little bit dirty doing that. So the oil would be scraped off of you and take some of that grime off of you. And then you'd probably take it and dip in one of the pools after the Unctorium. The strigil that you see there, the strigil is the uh, instrument that would be used to scrape. It's the oil scraper. It's what the strigil is. Yeah. So, in some countries, they still have similar things, right? It might not be exactly like this, but sometimes you hear them called Turkish baths, or in certain parts of the East where you can go in and go to all these different, different pools and different rooms. On an island off of Italy, I went to a place very similar to this where there was a bunch of different rooms with different temperature pools one time. So they do still have them in some places in Europe. This is advertisement, like a mosaic that advertised for one of the baths. And this verb lawisse means to wash, basically. So this instrument is telling you to come wash yourself. Lawisse. You have sandals here, and here it's kind of cool. This is the strigil I just told you about. This curved instrument would be used to scrape oil off of yourself. This is, a computer reconstruction of what a bath may have looked like when it was going full steam. This would be a big bath. There could be hundreds of people fitting in some of these baths, depending on which one it was, what time of day it was. But you can see kind of the steam coming out of it, and this would be kind of working at full steam ahead right now. As far as who was allowed to go, like I said, a lot of times they were subsidized by the government, so the fee was very cheap, so a lot of people could go if you save up your money a little bit. And men and women usually did not go to the same times of day. Depending on the city, there might be different baths for men and women, or sometimes there was like a certain time of day that this is the man time, and a certain time of day that the women were allowed to come, but it was uncommon in the baths. It was just seen as kind of, I don't know, weird or inappropriate for men and women to be gallivanting around a bath together. If you want to see baths, they all are all over the ancient world. You can see them in Italy. There's baths in Spain and France. But you guys already know that one of the most famous examples you could see if you ever go to England is make sure to check out Bath, England. You should already know about this because we did an assignment on Bath, England a few weeks ago. But this is a picture of the Aquae Sulis, which was built probably for the Roman soldiers because they were far from home. It's a lot colder in England, and it gave them a little something to look forward to, a little taste of home with the bath there. So, very cool thing, the thermae. And this would have, without the entertainment that we have today and the niceties of life we have today, this would be something that most people would really look forward to, going to a bath and get clean, socialize with people, talk to your friends and stuff, and really have a day out. So, anyways, that's our fact of the day, and I will ask you maybe a little bit about that on the next quiz, so make sure to get that in your fact of the day section. And then I want to take you through the chapter, which is chapter 17. These notes shouldn't take too long. This chapter is not too bad. It is a new conjugation of verbs, but it doesn't conjugate very differently from our first conjugation verb, so it won't seem like a bunch of new endings or anything like that, so don't be too scared of it. Excuse me, a little drink there. So just remember that a conjugation means a group of verbs that all look similar and conjugate in a similar way. They have similar endings. Remember, there's 4 conjugations of Latin verbs total that we're going to be learning throughout Latin. Obviously, this will be the last conjugation we learn this year because this is our last chapter. You'll probably learn third conjugation kind of near the beginning of Latin too. So how do you tell conjugations apart? How do you tell this is first or this is second conjugation? Well, it's all about the infinitive. Remember the second principal part is called the infinitive? So, excuse me. The infinitive here, the letter here tells you what conjugation the verb belongs to. I threw in third. This is third conjugation just because I wanted to have you see what it looks like. But this chapter is only going to be about first and second conjugation specifically. So look at the first conjugation. Remember all these verbs had an A here, amo, amare, pugnare, laudare, the ones we've learned all year, right? Second conjugation is new. We just learned the vocab yesterday. Moneo, monere. Remember that verb that means to warn or guide. Notice how there's a long E in the infinitive. Now, Is that makron? It is one of the important ones, right? I always tell you when there's a makron that's crucial. The reason it's crucial is because this verb is third conjugation. Even though we're not learning it this chapter, whenever you do learn third conjugation, the only way to tell them apart is from the long E of the infinitive in the second conjugation and the short E in the third conjugation. It might seem like a small detail, but these two actually conjugate pretty differently in a few respects. So if you can't tell the conjugations apart, you are in trouble. So first is an A, second is a long E, and third is a short E. Okay, so that's how you tell them apart. And of course, you just learned new vocab yesterday on the second conjugation, so you got to be practicing that. All the verbs you learned up until now this year have been first conjugation verbs. Now I'm just going to take you through each tense. Some of this will seem like review because these are using the same endings as the first conjugation, but you have to use the right stem of the second conjugation verbs, right? But this chapter will feel like some review, which is probably a good chapter to go out on. There's nothing too crazy. Okay. I accidentally, let me move myself here. I accidentally wrote third conjugation. We're only doing first and second conjugation, so there's no third. That's just a typo here in my notes. But this is a reminder right here, and this is the new conjugation. But look how the endings are the same, right? O-S-T, mustisinti. This is how you conjugate the present tense. What stem are we using here for the present tense? You should be using the present stem, which is from the infinitive. You cut off the RE, and that's where your stem comes from. That's why all of these have an E here, because the infinitive, the E is there. You cut off the RE to get your stem. So moneo, mones, monet, monemus, monetis, monent. That's how you conjugate it in the present tense. The present tense translates in the same way. You just have to know your new verbs, obviously. So if this verb means to warn, this verb would mean I warn, I am warning, or I do warn. So it's been quite a while since we've had a new verb chapter, so this is going to be a chance for us to review our verbs and to kind of focus in on understanding the verbs. And we do need to know all 6 tenses for first and second conjugation verbs. Here's a reminder of the imperfect tense. Here's a review of first, and here's our second conjugation. The tense sign is still ba. So monet bam, monet bas, monet bat. This is still using the present stem, from the second principal part. Okay. The translation is still imperfect translation. So I was warning or I used to warn are the best translations here. Do you recall the future tense sign? It is the same future tense sign for first conjugation. Maybe some of you do. Hopefully you do. So the future tense sign is the bo, bis, bit tense sign. So monebo, monebis, monebit, monebumos, monebitis, monebunt. And this would be like I shall warn, or you will warn, or he, she, it will warn. Okay. These first 3 tenses we just went over all come from the infinitive, this present stem, the second principal part. Once we move on to the next tense, perfect tense, they come in from the third principal part, which is the perfect stem. So make sure you have those straight. Now remember, all of these second conjugation verbs don't end in the same letter. In the first conjugation, they mostly ended in V, although there were some exceptions like dedi for do or steti for sto, but these are more variable. Monui, there's a U there in the stem. Remember, maneo goes to mansi. Wideo goes to widdi. These are from yesterday, but your new vocab. So you can't just think, oh, these are always going to end in U. It's not like that for this conjugation. You have to know the vocab to get the stem. Now, the endings here are the same for first conjugation and second conjugation. So there's no new endings, but you might need to review them and practice them. E isti it, imus istis erunt. Those should look very familiar as the perfect endings. How does a perfect tense translate? It translates as I warned, or I did warn, or I have warned. Those are the 3 perfect translations. The pluperfect comes from the same stem, the third perfect stem, but it is going to add eram, eras, erat, the pluperfect ending. This should be something you're kind of familiar with from the first conjugation. What's the one way to translate the pluperfect tense? It's going to be I had warned, or you had warned. And remember, we've done the pluperfect tense before. It means it's happening before the other before the other 2 tenses. So I had warned is happening before I warned. Okay. And of course, this week, as we translate, as we practice, excuse me, pardon me. As we practice, we'll go over each tense and how to translate each one, etc. Now, the final tense is called the future perfect, which we've done before. You should be familiar with that. And, excuse me, I apologize. Just ignore this column here. That's third conjugation, which I accidentally left in here. I meant to only do first and second, so just ignore that. That will not be on the next quiz. But notice how you're using the perfect stem here for both of these conjugations, and then you're adding ero, eris, erit, which has always been the future perfect translations, right? And this tense translates like I shall have warned or you will have warned. It's happening in the future, but we know it's done by a specific time. So with this conjugation, it's very important there's a lot that we kind of know here or we should know, but probably there's some things you need to bone up on, you might have forgotten, but we need to practice it to make sure we understand how to do each of these. But there's not any new big sets of endings for us to learn. It's really kind of honing everything we've learned this year to bring it all together so we know the first and second conjugation. And one last thing I want to remind you of was the imperatives, right? The imperative means it's the command form of the verb, and there's four imperative forms. These are the positive ones right here, and these are the negative ones. So there's singular positive and singular negative, plural positive, plural negative. Luckily, the second conjugation works the same way as the first as far as imperatives go. For the singular positive, you take off the re. So mone means warm. It's an order. And then monete, the te is plural, means like talking to more than one person, warn. You put noli in front of the infinitive to make the negative. So noli monera, do not warn. And then noli te monera means do not warn. Okay, so the imperatives will still be there. They could be on the quiz also. Okay, so you want to start looking over this chapter, and for your assignment that you have to do today that we'll look over tomorrow, I'm going to post myself reviewing it tomorrow. You have to do exercises A and B for this chapter, and it's not too bad. It's really just verb forms you have to translate, and just being able to look at a verb and translate it pretty quickly in your head is crucial to being able to translate a sentence effectively and quickly, right? So make sure to look closely at the ones I told you to do so you do the right ones, and I will post myself a video going over those tomorrow in case there's any you didn't understand. But make sure you know how to do it. You don't want to have to look things up too much because translating a sentence, if you don't understand the verb, there's a lot you won't be able to do about that sentence, okay? So if anything about today's notes didn't make sense, please come see me in my office hours. I can explain anything I talked about today if it didn't make perfect sense. And of course, we'll do some practice the rest of this week. You have your assignment today, and then we will quiz on this the end of next week. So you have still have a lot of time to learn this, to practice, and to get chapter 17 down before the quiz next Friday, okay? Thank you guys for watching and for sticking with me, and come by to see me in my office hours. I would love to talk to you, and I'll see you tomorrow to go over our assignment. Walete.